Greetings and thanks for joining the latest Real Story Group webinar. Today we're going to be talking about the new MarTech stack for the 2020s and what will that look like for you as you move forward. Our CEO and founder Tony Byrne is with us today. He's going to be taking us through the majority of today's presentation. My name is Scott Dill. I'm on the business development team here and just wanted to welcome you and thank you for taking some time out of your day for today's session. I did want to mention here as we get started, we will have some times at the end for questions. So if you do have any questions, you can enter those into the questions tab and then go to webinar control panel. As always, you will be able to access the slides a couple of days from now. So keep an eye out from that, an email from our marketing team with the slides. And then for our subscribers on the line, you can always access a recording of today's presentation in your subscriber library. So you can keep an eye out for that. That'll also be available within a couple of days. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Tony to get us going today. Tony?
Great. Thanks a lot, Scott. Super excited about this topic. This is something we put a lot of thought into over the past couple of years. And now we're taking the model that we have and starting to think about and share with you all what are some of the implications going forward for the rest of the decade. So really glad you're here with us today. And just a short kind of summary of what we'll be covering. First, in order to look forward, typically we like to also look backwards a little bit. So we're going to talk about how did we get to where we're at. There'll be a brief kind of historical tour, and we'll talk about some of how this led us to some contemporary dilemmas. And then we'll spend most of the session talking about what does this new stack look like, and in particular, what are implications for key components, including content management, web content management, customer data platforms, personalization, and other key topics. Then we'll wrap up with a summary of findings that you can take back with you to your workplace. So most of you know Real Story Group as a vendor evaluation firm, and that is what we've been doing for more than 2 decades and continue to do so. And you may have seen our famous or infamous vendor map here, which tries to put all of the different vendors that we cover across different marketplaces into a single kind of subway or tube map. And you can see these are highly fragmented marketplaces. They do intersect at different vendors, which is another way of saying that some big vendors have multiple different offerings or suites that they would like to sell you. Of course, a lot of the innovation and interesting things is happening more around the outside. But what this doesn't tell you, of course, is look at the marketplace. It doesn't necessarily tell you, what should your stack look like. And now more than ever, some of the major vendors in the center of this city are saying, well, your stack should be our suite. And of course, for the vast majority of you, that's exactly what you don't want to do. And a lot of the rest of this session is going to be sort of explaining why that is. But first, let's take a little bit of a history tour. So when we first started Real Story Group, it was a firm, our original name was CMS Watch, and we evaluated web CMS tools. And this was our sort of initial reference model for the 2000s. And the goal was truly to be multi-channel, that your content management system could apply some workflows, some business rules to a library, get various inputs, and then push out different formats. But these were still very text-heavy, somewhat page-centric formats. So it was multi-channel, but not necessarily, very, very structured, and for that matter, not necessarily very customer-centric. Meanwhile, a number of other forms of engagement emerged, and so in the 2010s, the reference model that we had under our new name, Real Story Group, looked kind of like this, that you had these major channels, including social, email, mobile, video started to arise. You had a variety of different production, interaction, delivery services underneath that. And then in the colored bar here was where I think most of us spent the 2010s, which was building out our web content management capabilities, possibly installing a digital media asset management system, looking at outbound marketing through marketing automation and email service providers, and then, of course, social engagement, ideally on some sort of customer data backbone, although for most of us there was not much of a backbone. But we spent a lot of time in the 2010s really building up these 4 silos and modernizing and professionalizing the teams that ran them. And so a lot of value came out of that, but also a lot of problems. And the biggest problem was that these systems really got too bloated, and we we started having these silos of interaction where I would have one experience in an e-commerce environment, a different experience on your website, a different experience by email. And by experience, I mean not just look and feel, though that's obviously an issue, but more that, the things on offer and the communications language and how much I was known as a customer would vary because everything was extremely channel specific. So we kind of modernized ourselves into a very siloed channel specific world. And this is, where a lot of us ended up circa 2018, where you have, your advertising, web, email, each with their own content, their own data, their own rules, their own planning, and their own analytics. And the answer that many of us have been trying to apply, or the solution that we've been trying to apply, is to do a lot of lateral integration, right? I'm going to integrate my email platform with my digital asset management system. I'm going to email my chatbot maybe with my website and all these other things. And the problem is that if these are built up as sort of vertical silos, it becomes almost, impossible to do this. And many of you are really struggling with these kind of spaghetti architectures right now. And so any kind of architecture for the 2020s has to deal with this core issue first and foremost, to have a more consistent, customer-centric view across multiple different journeys. And our concept around this is that an enterprise target reference model for an integrated customer experience is going to decouple or abstract some core services from specific silos to become more enterprise-wide services. So obviously, omnichannel operations, unified customer data, often reflected in the CDP, journey orchestration and personalization, omnichannel content, and customer intelligence, all ideally decoupled from specific channels, so that then you can go and add new channels on top of this enterprise foundation services. And so this is really the key insight that we've been bringing to the market, but this also has, tremendous implications for your architecture. And again, this is a target reference model. We don't know any organization among our many large enterprise subscribers who are actually here yet. But many of you are trying to get here, and you just need kind of a label and a target to sort of help you describe and bring your peers along. And so this is our latest MarTech services reference model, and it's for a composable stack. Right? So another way of putting this is that there's no vendor, there's no product that's going to get you to omnichannel. You have to get yourselves to omnichannel, and it starts really with architecture. There's a lot of other implications that play out of this that I'll get to in a minute, but basically it's up to you to build an omnichannel stack, and by definition that stack is going to have to be a composable stack. So yes, you still have a variety of engagement channels at the top, interaction delivery environments from advertising to websites to storefronts, distribution to partners, so on and so forth. Still engagement services, which are critical to get right. So you've got customer care, maybe loyalty, CRM, so on and so forth. Outbound marketing, web content management, but then you have this new layer of enterprise foundation services that are decoupled from specific channels and from specific customer-facing applications. So on the left, you have a tier that's content and information, so what we call omnichannel content services, which often then assumes digital asset management and product information management. In the middle tier, the middle column, you've got data services, so we divide this into customer data activation, customer data operations, and enterprise data intelligence. And then decisioning, where you have experience optimization, omnichannel personalization, and journey orchestration. And the key thing is to make these services more broadly available across all your different engagement environments. So we sometimes refer to this as a kind of Pilates, where instead of you sort of working on your upper body and your customer-facing stuff, you're working on your core and then reflecting those capabilities forward into your different channels. So the goal here is to then sort of decouple these services from your different engagement services. Now, this is a generic reference model. When we work with our subscribers, we typically customize this to their environment. Every environment is going to be different. And also, this is aspirational. So you can't just sort of deliver this overnight unless you're in a total greenfield environment. So there's issues around, how much do we play off modernizing our engagement services versus building these capabilities underneath that are going to be more omnichannel. These are difficult trade-offs, but we really do encourage you to have a proactive plan going forward about how you're going to get here. And that's certainly an area we can help you, as we've helped many other firms. But there are some key implications for this as well around how your stack is going to change. And I'm just going to isolate 4 or 5 different areas just as examples around what is likely to change and how it might change going forward. So let's talk about these implications, and I'll remind you that if you have any questions at all or any comments, anything you disagree with, any anecdote you'd like to share, feel free to do that in the questions tab in your GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll definitely have time to get to those in about 10 or 15 minutes or so. Let's look at some implications for key components. I think one is very interesting, and I always started as a content guy. I still think content management is fascinating, even as we're looking more at data and decisioning as well. And I think that where this is taking us from a content perspective is a return to a kind of enterprise content management for structured content in some sort of an omni-channel content platform. Now, the vendors are not as mature here as we would like. Many of us as organizations are not as mature here as we would like. But where we see this going is reusable and trackable content components, whether it's text snippets, pricing information, media assets, are going to be managed at an enterprise level so that they can be renditioned and derived in channel-specific ways across all of your different channels, rather than asset and content management being a subsystem within your loyalty group, within social media, within your email platform. Instead, you'll draw from a more enterprise library of these sorts of services. That means there'll still be a place for web content management in the future, but the good news for you, not for the big vendors, but for you, the good news around WCM is that the scope of web content management is going to narrow. You're going to be focusing more on long-form experiential content, maybe some value story content, some page management and assembly. So you may manage some of the placement of components that are drawing content from an omnichannel content platform. But your web content management system is likely to become lighter. And this is a good thing. So as you consider sort of doubling down on your investments in heavyweight platforms like Sitecore, Drupal, certainly Adobe, and others, you really ought to think about whether that's really the best place to make that investment, and that maybe you should be investing lower in your stack on core omnichannel content, and then this then narrows the scope of your WCM efforts. And we've helped some organizations trying to transition to some of these lighter weight systems, and they've been quite successful at it and also reduced their costs and a lot of their overhead. So this is certainly one implication with respect to enterprise content management. We'll come back to WCM again when we talk about our next topic, which is personalization. What's the future of personalization? Now, you can get a more detailed look at this. My colleague Apoorv and I just did a webinar around this a week ago, and those of you who are subscribers can find it in your subscriber library. But we all make jokes about personalization because very often it just doesn't work very well, even though many firms have been at this for 20 years. So you see on the left that they're recommending the famous anecdote that came from Twitter around a toilet seat, and then they're suggesting getting AirPods Pro. Or the gentleman here who wanted to get his wife some flowers, and instead Whole Foods suggested that he get a red bell pepper instead. So we've all seen this, and it's funny, but it also speaks to some deeper issues around personalization, that it involves a really complex orchestration of micro content, really strong customer data, and some really rock solid decisioning. And so it really spans a lot of the domains we're talking about. And when you just use like a personalization subsystem within your email platform or your chat platform or your web content management system, it's likely going to prove too narrow and too parochial in the way that it approaches that particular person. So, personalization is another area where we really have to take more of a kind of a 360 view. And, this is really the issue, though, is that today, for most of us, we have personalization, again, is not a tier in our in our stack. It's a service or a subsystem within a lot of our other channels, and this can work to a limited extent, but is not going to be tenable or in the omni-channel future. And so, we think the future is that more and more, this will happen over time, more and more omni-channel personalization is going to become a layer in your stack. It will have to be disconnected from your engagement services and applied in a channel-specific way across services. Getting here is going to take time, but we think this is really the future implication. The good news here, again, is that this means you can get lighter at the engagement level. In other words, you don't have to get a personalization-heavy web content management system. You don't need to make personalization part of how you evaluate an e-commerce platform. You don't need to think about personalization in your email marketing platform. What you need is for those platforms to be able to integrate with the personalization layer in your stack. Again, this is easier said than done. We've been advising some of our subscribers through this transition, and it's not like you can snap ahead. These are not Lego bricks that you can snap in. But there is a flow and a process to this, and we think that this is really the best future for you and something to start working towards. Customer data is a complicated topic. That's the understatement of the week. So let's talk about, we've talked about the left column and then the right column. Let's talk about the middle column down here under Enterprise Foundation Services. Customer data management is really, really hard. You have a lot of legacy data. You've got potential real-time data. We're all learning more and more each year about our needs and obligations around compliance, stewardship, and any number of other issues. Certainly privacy has come to the fore. And so these are some difficult topics. You've probably seen other webinars we've done on this. We again divide it into sort of more forward-facing customer data activation, and then sort of more backward-facing customer data operations that are more of an enterprise tier, and then enterprise data intelligence, which kind of lives to the side of both of those. And you need to have a strategy around all three of these. And what's interesting is if you look in the marketplace, you have CDP vendors who can say they can do all three of those, plus maybe some personalization, plus maybe some outbound marketing. There are other CDP vendors that maybe can do two of these boxes or focus on just one of these boxes. So you have some critical choices around scope in this new world. And it's not just for data, but I'm going to use data as an example here, that you need to be very clear around which platforms are providing which services. And it's the same side on the content and information and the decisioning funnels here as well. You may have a single vendor logo that's covering multiple boxes, or you may have multiple vendor logos in one box, but you've got to be very clear about what the service boundaries are. And unfortunately, a lot of the vendor marketing around this has made some of this really muddled. But one of the other really interesting implications here about this Enterprise Foundation service is this is really where marketing ops intersects with IT ops and data ops. We talk about MarTech and blended teams and tiger teams, and that's great. And we see growing collaboration, whether it's dotted line or not, between marketing people and their technology-oriented counterparts. That's the whole vision of MarTech, and other people have said that much better than I can. But where this really comes to a fore is when we start talking about Enterprise Foundation Services, because technically the sorts of platforms that are on offer here tend to be quite technical and quite complex. And just by saying that you're going to do omni-channel introduces all kinds of interesting issues around governance and scale and other technical topics. And so this is really going to be important to have service boundaries in your stack, but to also understand the operational implications of this and to understand where the service boundaries are there. So if we take, for example, customer data, and we have this world where customer data operations is more technically complicated and a little bit more enterprise-facing, whereas customer data activation is a little bit more business-focused, a little more marketing-focused, a little bit more customer engagement-focused, then you can imagine potentially different operational models and different teams, where on the customer data ops and enterprise data intelligence, you've got integration engineers, data scientists, and they're using pretty sophisticated data management tool sets, usually as part of a broader data fabric, to prepare the data for activation. So, the key themes here are data fabric, data operations, and data products. One of those products could be a feed to your customer data activation environment, where it's going to be more around a marketing manager and a marketing analyst, where you want to leverage that data for better engagement. Some of the key themes here are self-service and going from data to actual activation services. So it's interesting because many CDPs will provide both or parts of both sides, and so you can have multiple constituents in a CDP selection project. But you need to understand sort of the operational needs here and how they might be different. But also, if this is going to be successful, then the folks here on the left have to be really close touch and work closely with the people on the right and vice versa. You can't have this black box thing within marketing or IT. These teams can even be blended teams. We've seen this. And so you really need to think through what are the operational implications of this new stack model that we are considering. And what it does mean is that even for your more business-facing applications, you are going to need a more tech-savvy marketing people and more marketing-savvy IT people. Probably nothing new there to you. So let's do a quick summary of the findings, and then once again, I'll invite you to ask whatever questions you may have, and then, or any comments that you'd like to share, anything that you might disagree about. So here's what we think you ought to do. First is to transition your investments lower in your stack to foundational services rather than buying a bloated chatbot, CRM, web content management, email marketing platform, where many of the services really don't belong that high up in your stack anymore. And that's really the central sort of thesis that lies underneath this reference model. So you still want to maintain agility and flexibility in those customer-facing environments, and again, ideally with lighter tooling as you look to replace some of those aging platforms that suffer from a lot of technical debt, to get something lighter with a narrower scope. Lighter is good because it's going to be easier for your people to use. Focus on the right fit tooling as opposed to vendor consolidation within suites. So the vendor story, particularly from Salesforce, Oracle, to some extent Microsoft, definitely Adobe, to some extent SAP, is that we can, if you just stick with us, we'll take you to the omnichannel world. And that's just flat out not true. If you stick with them, you're going to inherit a lot of technical debt, a lot of incompatible technology, and a lot of ill-fitting solutions that they've acquired. And so if you're really focused on right fit and the kind of agility that you want, you're really going to want a composable stack. You're going to be doing the same amount of integration work either way. So as you look to rationalize your stack, focus it on services rather than vendors. And so you may have, in fact, most of our subscribers do have a single vendor or a single platform that's covering multiple boxes. Some people want to bundle personalization with their CDP. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that if that's what makes sense for you. And then my last point here, which we're starting to talk about a lot more with our council members, is around what are the operational implications and the corollary considerations around operational integration between DevOps, IT ops, and marketing ops, and how what does it mean to be business friendly in this new world, and what kind of technical capabilities do we need even within our marketing teams themselves, as opposed to relying exclusively on IT. And so our council just recently met and had some great conversations around this, which we've written up, and we'll have more to say on that going forward. So if you are trying to get to this world, Real Story Group can help you in 3 different ways. One is we have the hardest hitting vendor evaluations of all of these different marketplaces, and you can subscribe to a stream like the CDP stream and get access to tools that allow you to navigate our vendor evaluations, build your own custom real quadrant shortlists. Some of our subscribers pick option number 2, which is what we call a full stack subscription, where you just subscribe to all of our vendor evaluations, all of our advisory papers, all of our private webinars, and everything. You get it all. And we also advise you on your stack formation and your stack strategy. So that's kind of a full stack subscription. A subset of those have joined our third offering here, which is our large enterprise MarTech Executive Leadership Council. So these are MarTech leaders from large organizations who meet privately every couple of months to share information, educate each other, help each other solve difficult problems. It's been just a wonderful group. It's not open to vendors. It's just end user enterprises only. And our next topic is going to be on later in June, where we're going to be talking about the integration between e-commerce and marketing technology, which is a really hot topic that they came up with. And then we're going to be meeting again in person. So super excited about that in September. So if you're interested in any of that, I encourage you to connect up with my colleague, Scott, who can be reached at any of these coordinates. And of course, you can always download a free sample of our research as well. So Scott, you can talk about next steps while I take a look and see what questions have come forward.
Great, thanks, Tony. And as Tony mentioned, we're happy to walk you through the different tools that will be available to you as a Real Story Group subscriber. So just reach out to us, explore@realstorygroup.com. We can set up a behind-the-scenes tour of the subscriber experience. We can also share some more detailed information about the Stack Leadership Council that Tony mentioned. We are meeting on June 23rd, so feel free to touch base with us on that. And it's a great group of Stack leaders from enterprises from all around the world, and it'd be great to chat with you about that. It does look like there's at least one question that's come in, Tony. Maybe a couple others will trickle in as well.
Yeah, this first question is from James, and he's asking a really interesting question about measuring the stack itself. And so he's asked, which is a really interesting question, what are some common KPIs that organizations should be using to measure the performance of their MarTech stack? Things like process efficiency, business impact, cost optimization, risk optimization. Yeah, James, that's a good short list. I think our approach to this, we're not typically financial analysts, so we don't get into a lot of ROI calculations, but as we talk to organizations around this, we typically recommend that you use the same 4 cones or vectors that you use to evaluate any, technology business effectiveness, and that typically revolves around, number 1 would be greater efficiency, number 2 would be enhanced revenues, number 3 would be risk reduction, and number 4 would be to the extent of alignment with any kind of qualitative transformation that the enterprise is trying to undertake. So those are the 4 typical justifications of this sort of spend. And then within each of those 4 categories, the priorities are going to vary according to what type of company you are, what your leadership is trying to do. And so, some may be more around market share than revenue enhancement, that sort of thing. So it's really around aligning with whatever the broader strategic business objectives are. And it's an interesting question because that's typically where we start with a MarTech stack analysis is, we can put logos in boxes and help you visualize your stack. But what we really like to start with when we're doing these sort of full stack analyses for our subscribers is, what are your strategic business objectives? What are you trying to accomplish as a company? And what are your priorities? And then kind of build from there. Okay. So Stan is asking, what are you most excited about when it comes to innovation on the marketing cloud side, Salesforce, Adobe Experience, etc.? So I'm not really excited about them. I think these firms have an excessive proclivity to bullshit their customers, and so that's another reason why I don't get excited when they say things, because I'm not convinced that they're always telling the truth or the full truth. So I think what I would wish for them to do is to decouple their stacks and make their offerings more composable, but they seem to have the exact opposite strategy. So I don't get excited about those vendors. Orchestration engines coming onto the scene. Yeah, they are doing some work around orchestration. Journey orchestration is a complicated set of technologies. One of the things holding the marketplace back is that enterprises ourselves tend not to be mature enough to fully exploit a lot of orchestration capabilities that are on the market right now. But I will grant you that. So anyway, great. Well, we've reached our time. I really value the time that we spend together. Feel free to reach out if you'd like to follow up with us on any of these sorts of topics. and best wishes for the rest of your week. So for Scott Dill, this is Tony Byrne signing out. Bye now.